Dishonorable Mention is brought to you by 813area.com. 813area.com is the place to go to see where to go and what to do in all of Hillsborough County. Whether it's the best events, the newest restaurants, or where to be in Tampa Bay, 813 Area is your resource for everything happening around town. For the latest on where to be in 813, check out 813area.com. Dishonorable Mention is now on social media. Follow us on Facebook, and we're at Dishonorable Pod on Twitter too. Next week, we'll start taking questions from Twitter because y'all have been an amazing part of this. Thank you.
What are the latest trends in commercial real estate? How's the process of consolidation going for the University of South Florida? What's the future of the Rays? And should we criminalize prostitution? This and much, much more on the latest episode of Dishonorable Mention. Say hello to everyone. I'm Ernest Hooper, Tampa Bay Times columnist, and as always, I'm joined by community activist Becca Teeter, State Representative Chris Latvala, and our fourth podcast partner, Dr. Carla Mastracchio, is on assignment. I love saying on assignment. So we are joined by a very special guest, Mr. Mike Griffin, Managing Director for Seville's Occupier Service. Welcome, Mike.
Great to be here. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, we're also joined by Mike's son, Maverick.
Maverick, say hello.
You're on the podcast. You're good?
You say go Bulls?
Say go Bulls.
He can take the mic, that's for sure. So anyway, in addition to being the managing director for Seville's and one of the top commercial real estate people in Tampa Bay, Mike is also a proud USF alum, and he's on a committee that is helping the university with its consolidation efforts. Mike, can you talk a little bit about where the university and where your committee is in terms of consolidating the different USF campuses?
No, absolutely. Well, I was fortunate to have been appointed to a task force about a year ago now, and this task force was made up of various community leaders throughout the Bay Area, and we really dove in very deeply into the pros, which are many, of why consolidation is not only great for the university but for the region. And so we submitted our report right before the legislative session. And that report was well received by the community, by the legislature, Board of Governors, and others. So right now, I'm just very involved with making sure that report is implemented properly. The university is right now working on their implementation plan, which is certainly going to be very detailed, and that is going to be submitted to the Board of Governors in November.
So I know there's been some criticism coming from the USF St. Petersburg campus. What's your message to the faculty and the students there who are concerned about maintaining their independence?
Well, I think it's, when I started this process a year ago, my thoughts on consolidation are very different than they are now. And I think the biggest movement for me personally, being a Tampa guy, if you will, even though I was born in Pinellas, but really, came out of the Tampa campus at USF is realizing that strengthening our campuses and embracing their unique identities is very, very important to strengthen our position as a preeminent university. What I mean by that is our friends in St. Petersburg, our friends in Sarasota, Manatee, and Tampa should really focus on what those unique identities are. It is amazing to look at St. Petersburg and that campus, the urban environment that it's in. It's on the waterfront. I think it's the most beautiful campus of any institution in the state of Florida. But now with that preeminent tag to it, there are students that want to be a part of that amazing university called USF, but may not want to go to Fowler Avenue, may not want to be part of 40,000 students, but to be on a campus with 5,000 to 7,000 students is very, very attractive to a lot of high caliber students. And so what I'd say to my friends in St. Petersburg is continue to do the great work that they've been doing, because the more that you exceed those benchmarks, the more others, and candidly some naysayers, are going to realize that, they do have the talent there to rise and to really elevate their position there. And I think that they're up to the challenge.
And the bottom line is the University of South Florida is going to continue to be better than the University of Central Florida. Chris, comments?
Except for when it comes to any kind of sporting event, as has been seen last 3 years with the introduction of the War on I-4 trophy. That is a trophy that weighs all sports, and UCF has won it every year of its existence. And this year it was like 70 to 15 or something like that.
Yeah.
And our football team is far surpassed USF, so that's not even a question. And you don't even have to take my word for it. You can take Charlie Strong's word for it. After this year's drumming and Raymond James, he even said that USF had a long way to go before they're at the level of UCF.
So, Chris, what I'm hearing from you is that the most important thing about an academic institution is their athletic achievements. Is that what you would say? Because from what I understand, and not a graduate of either institution, it's much more academically competitive at the University of South Florida. Is that correct?
Well, when you don't have any trophies to speak of, then that is what you can argue.
But they've got like Rhodes Scholars and stuff. So would you say that is less valuable than a I-4 corridor trophy?
We had a Miss America at UCF.
Do you realize how difficult it is to be a USF fan when you have to put up with this? I mean, it is unbelievable.
And we had the creators of the Blair Witch Project at UCF too.
Okay, creators of the Blair Witch Project, a beauty queen, of which there are countless from USF.
And Daniel Tosh.
Daniel Tosh, really helping a feminist with your argument here. And even further, you talked about athletic achievement, where Michael focused, from what I understand, mostly on economic growth, student opportunity, and that they're a much more competitive school to get into.
Economic growth, we're the largest university in Florida.
Didn't the proposal about USF consolidation come before one of your committees in the legislature?
And I voted for it. It was sponsored by Representative Sprouse, who is a proud graduate of USF, and I thought that the idea was certainly warranted, and to me, it seemed like a good idea, and it most importantly, it would have brought in more money to USF, and I think that we will see that, and no names are being changed, and USF St. Pete, which was the campus I was, most concerned with, since that is in Pinellas, they will still have some autonomy. So I was proud to support the proposal.
All right, Mike, I also wanted to ask you about commercial real estate. That's kind of your expertise. We are seeing so many different projects taking place in Tampa Bay, particularly Water Street, Tampa. Now they're talking about Midtown, which is a huge proposed development that's going to be going up near Del Mabry and Cypress. West Shore Mall is talking about adding apartments. We've seen the infusion of energy in downtown St. Petersburg, in downtown Dunedin. What's happening in terms of commercial real estate? And is there a risk that we're building too much?
Sure. It's phenomenal. I think, first, when you have one individual like Jeff Finnick, who had a vision and is implementing that vision, it really, a lot of that started there. And when you look at the nature of financing for commercial projects, historically in this market, you'd have to have a lot of companies committed to entering the building before you could get the financing to come out of the ground. And the reality is that there's much more construction happening now on a spec basis, which is basically like, all right, we're going to build it and they will come.
That sounds like a great line for a movie.
Yes, thank you. I thought of that all by myself. But it's our job market and our low unemployment. And it honestly has a lot to do with USF. That pipeline of talent, of high quality talent, is here. And so businesses want to be here. And so we're effectively out of commercial real estate space. And so when you're out of space, it's very difficult for companies to move in if the buildings aren't there. And so that's why you're seeing a lot of construction happen at once. And I think everyone woke up at the same time and said, wow, Tampa Bay is where we want to grow our business or relocate it. Mosaic did that, the first Fortune 500 company to ever relocate in Hillsborough County and its history is just one example of that bullishness, if you will, on this region.
So we're not at risk of waking up 5 or 10 years from now and seeing a lot of vacant office space in Tampa Bay.
I don't. If we see that, it's not going to be because of the economy. It's going to be because of how people are working and how people are going to be working differently. There's more emphasis on working remotely, working at home. So I think there could be some changes in that, and that's why you've got groups like WeWork and some of these co-working companies that are coming here, taking down 50, 60,000 square feet of office space in downtown Tampa with no one committed yet. They're going to spend 10 times that in construction costs. And it's just incredible to see that happen. But I think it's going to be more about how people change how they work versus it being anything involving overbuilding or anything from an economic issue.
The other term we keep hearing is mixed use, and we're seeing some high-rise apartments going up in downtown Tampa. There's a proposal for perhaps a 50-story tower in St. Petersburg. Is that going to work for us, you think?
I think so. I think then the next question is getting into affordable housing. And unfortunately, we've seen in other areas that are maybe ahead of us in development that's really pricing a lot of people out of the city. You're seeing it in places like Austin. It's not just places like San Francisco. And so I really hope that our local leaders do more to incentivize developers to build affordable housing in these amazing urban areas.
Yeah, local leader. What you doing about that?
That's a tall glass of what the hell, Chris?
Is that more of a city and county issue, or can the legislature help with that?
I think there are aspects that the legislature can help with, but mostly I think it's a city and county issue.
Well, it's going to be interesting because it seems to be happening so rapidly. The one place where we probably would need to see more development is Clearwater, which seems to still be trying to get going on this trend. What are your thoughts about that, Becca?
Well, I'd like to say, number one, I think what Chris said is really important, and that's why home rule is so valuable, and I hope continues to be protected, letting local governments make decisions. But, I think Clearwater is seeking a true identity. They know they have a great beach, arguably one of the best in the world. But I don't think as a community, we have figured out who we want to be. I think Tampa has a real sense of self. I think St. Pete has. I think Dunedin's got their funky vibe, so does Safety Harbor. And I think the problem is Clearwater is a little Harvey Milquetoast. And so it doesn't have the same level of identity that others have. Now, does it have as much to offer? Does it have as much rich culture? A shocking amount of culture, both diversity in race and religion. And we have this incredible arts center, Ruth Eckerd Hall, right down the street. We've got, I know we're famous for Winter the Dolphin. There's so much here. We don't have a city problem. We have a branding problem. And I think until we figure out that identity, we're going to be less attractive than some of the other areas.
And I think in some regards, and I'm not talking about just, specific leaders, but I think as a whole, for a while, the leadership is just happy to be there. People are just happy to serve on the city council. And so, things get kicked down the road and pushed down the road. And so it takes years and years for decisions to happen and things to get implemented. Cushman Park's a perfect example. Lord knows when anything's going to get done with that place, or the Harbor View Center.
Well, and, Chris, we talk about this a lot because we're both proud residents of this area. We've got an incredible medical school going up just miles from here. We've got Baycare centered here. Hooters was not only founded here, but maintains a corporate presence. We have lots of other...
Phillies.
Yeah, the Phillies, and the Threshers. And if you're looking for a great time, whether it's a date night or a family event, there is no better, I think Chris and I would both agree, there's no better night out than going to the Thresher Stadium. And there's nothing but opportunity. And like I said, we've got world-class arts and culture. It's just we don't maybe it is a leadership problem. We haven't managed to articulate that. And I think far too many people who live in our Clearwater zip codes drive to St. Pete for those things when they're really in their backyard.
Right. And I think it's kind of an identity crisis. And we saw that in the referendum with the strong mayor of, there are people that want to treat it as still being a small town, but, we can't compete with St. Petersburg if we're still going to operate as a small town.
Well, and what I heard overwhelmingly and why people didn't support strong mayor is they didn't have confidence in the current leadership. They didn't want any of the people who were currently serving
Right.
To be in that position as a strong mayor. And so I think that just echoes that we need to really call to the community for really strong leadership to come forward who have both vision and both an understanding of the economic impact that we have the potential to have and where we can go.
I'll trade you Bob Buckhorn for something. You can take him as your Clearwater mayor. I don't know.
He would really jazz things up.
Maybe for like Capona's dugout or get a Lenny's in Tampa or something.
That'd be interesting. I wonder if Bob would be willing to move to Clearwater and run.
I would take him. I mean, because he's a guy that has a vision. And
he is a visionary leader.
And we don't, that there's really not a visionary that is in local municipal government in Clearwater. Maybe at the county level there is, but I can't think of, our current mayor, nice guy, whatever, but
lovely guy.
He's not necessarily gonna set the place on fire with his vision.
Well, and I think from what I've observed, and I don't know him nearly as well as you or actually Mike does, but I think he is a very cautious guy. And I think vision requires
That's a great way to describe him. If cautious is, don't want to pick a side because you don't want to tick anybody off and lose supporters.
He's very present in the community, but I don't think we have moved forward. And as somebody who was born and raised here, as much as we have accomplished, it's almost like it's done in the dark. And so I think this honorable mention is calling for real visionary leadership for the city of Clearwater.
And the potential is there. I mean, that's the amazing thing. All the elements, I think, are in place for Clearwater to be the next great downtown destination in Tampa Bay. They just need someone to put it together. What do you think, Mike?
Well, I mentioned earlier, I'm a Pinellas native. I was born in Dunedin. Grew up until my parents moved to Hillsborough County when I was in elementary school, but I have a lot of family in Clearwater. I've never real I just I know there's a lot of excuses why, right? It's because of the church, or it's because of the economy, or we don't have a piece of land to connect this and that. I mean, the waterfront and the fact that you have literally millions, if not a million people driving through that downtown to get to arguably the greatest beach on the planet, a Clearwater Beach, and not capitalize on that is just mind-boggling. And so, you've got the numbers, you've got the traffic counts, putting it back to commercial real estate, but it's literally just a pass-through city. And I know that being a Tampa guy, I would absolutely go there if there was something to do, right? And but you need people. You need to put things there that will draw people to neighborhoods and parts of our that downtown and our community that's unique. And there's no uniqueness to Clearwater. Yeah,
and I think that we still have some, in the scheme of things, some more affordable housing, and we have some great schools, which is something to be celebrated, And so I think it's always better to have a branding problem than not have something to offer your community. But we definitely need leadership to kind of invigorate and get the pride going for the people of Clearwater.
And I think when it comes to the church, a lot of our leadership is scared of the church.
That's the Church of Scientology, by the way.
And yeah, we call it in Clearwater, they're just known as the church for short. And there's been leaders in the past that will refuse to talk to them. And you can't get anything done if you don't talk to somebody and if you don't meet with somebody. And then you just have the status quo that goes on for years and years. Meanwhile, the church continues to buy up building after building, block after block of downtown.
You can either make excuses or you can make bridges. And
Right.
you and I are for the bridge variety.
So, speaking of development, we are approaching a point where the Tampa Bay Rays are going to have to make a decision about what they're going to do in regards to Tropicana Field. We're expecting an announcement in August on whether they're going to try to stay in St. Petersburg and work with the city of St. Petersburg to have a new stadium built in St. Petersburg, or if they're going to go to Mayor Rick Kreisman and ask for another shot at putting a stadium in Tampa. Mike, you were part of a committee that tried to help pave the way for a stadium in Ybor City last year. That deal didn't come to fruition. Where do you think we are now in terms of the Rays and keeping them in the region?
So, one, the committee is still alive, and there's a few of us that are still involved with trying to find a solution that involves, both the public and private sectors, and a P3 partnership. I think ultimately the funding solution needs to be regional. One side of the Bay or the other cannot do it alone. And I think that when you talk about leadership, I give a lot of respect to Mayor Kreisman for showing a lot of leadership on the issue, which provided that 3-year window. And look, over on our side of the Bay in Hillsborough, I don't believe we put our best foot forward. And I don't blame one person or one entity, but if the deal wasn't going to work in Hillsborough, I wish that run at 100 miles an hour and try to run through that finish line rather than stumble. And I feel like we stumbled. But Major League Baseball is not going to ignore a top 10 or 11 media market.
Well, we hope not.
But it's got to be viewed differently. I think we need to view this more as a real estate development play than just looking at a ballpark. But our group, the Rays 2020, secured $16 million of new reoccurring commitments in a very short period of time, and that was without naming rights. And so a little short of our goal, but we were on our way. And unfortunately, our local elected officials in Hillsborough weren't able to get a deal put together in time. But it's not over. But the team needs to stay in Tampa Bay. I personally don't. I mean, I think Tampa's the right place or the best place, but it's more important that we keep them here, and that's a regional effort.
My concern is that the attendance continues to be on the decline, and I think that those attendance figures may prompt Major League Baseball and Rays ownership to look at a different market. And I think there's a lot of factors involved in the decline in attendance. I'm not sure it's an accurate reflection of how people in this community feel about baseball, but I wish we could see those numbers rise. And the Rays did take the step of offering a $5 ticket deal for games that are going to be occurring the week of June 10th. That's a terrific first step. I also, it's very, very tricky. As much as we talk about being a region and thinking of ourselves as one Tampa Bay, there's still a lot of provincialism. And I think there are people in St. Petersburg, people in Pinellas County who feel slighted by the 3-year effort to get a stadium done in Hillsborough. And I'd like to see the Rays make an effort to come back and kind of mend fences with Pinellas a little bit and say, listen, this is for the region. You have to understand that. Don't be mad at us because we spent 3 years trying to put a new stadium in Tampa. And I'm not sure they've done enough on that front. What do you think, Chris?
Well, if they stay in Pinellas, where do you think logically they would be looking at? I can only think of 2 places in Pinellas. Al Lang Park, which they tried previously and were unsuccessful, but now the Rays own it. But I think they would still have some of the same issues that they have currently with Tropicana, with the location and people getting there and so forth. And the other place that I can think of is Derby Lane. But other than that, I don't know of a spot in St. Pete that would work.
I was really romanticized. I think there was some environmental problems with it, but I thought when they were talking about the Feather Sound area, I thought that was exciting to me because I thought that's really accessible. Let's be honest, there's not a lot of exciting things around there, so that'd be a really nice chance for economic boost, and it's a nice compromise. It's centrally located and easily accessible.
Well, and I think just the what you can't do, and the waterfront outlaying is interesting, but it doesn't solve the fundamental issue of the density or lack of households in and around the radius of that campus,
right,
or of that site is just not there. The Trop never should have been built where it is, and so by moving it to Tampa, it's not just a Tampa thing. It's you literally overnight almost quadruple the amount of household access to that location, and so I think that the Derby Lane site's interesting with all the work they're doing on Gandy on both the Hillsborough, and they finished on the Pinell side. But again, you got to look at the households and the densities, and candidly, Tampa has it, particularly the Ybor site.
The other issue about Derby Lane is that my friends from the Union of Concerned Scientists will tell you that that area may be subject to chronic flooding by 2040 or 2050 as we continue to deal with climate change.
I'm sorry, Ernest. We have a bunch of Republicans here today, so they don't believe in climate change. So perhaps you should use a different.
That's not true.
First and foremost, we're not scientists, so let's get that out of the way. Secondly, if we can get a gaming bill done, that has sports books, we could build a sports book at Derby Lane and put a ballpark around it. So that,
and there is precedence in Major League Baseball that there's a stadium with a casino in the same property, and I believe, I may be wrong, but I believe it's in Cleveland, either like Cleveland or Detroit, somewhere like that. So there is precedence there.
Well, as long as you put the ballpark on stilts, I think we're going to be fine.
Well, nothing like a good short-term solution. But I tell you what, that casino, which it is always, in the Hard Rock in Tampa, it is always packed out.
Well, it's like the 6th largest casino in the world.
It's unbelievable.
Well, I was there last night.
Wow.
And
here we go, live reporting.
Ironically, I'd been there in probably about a year, but you're walking around the Hulkster, a good USF guy, good Clearwater guys walking around. You see all these amazing Tampa celebs. It's the place to be seen, but the place was just wall to wall packed. And I asked one of the hotel workers or the casino workers, I'm like, roughly how many are local versus not? And they said at least half are local, and the other come in from out of state or out of, sometimes even out of the country. But it's amazing that many people locally are hanging out there.
And you can go in the middle of the night and it would still be packed.
Well, then I think what we need to do is everybody's mad at that amphitheater. Let's just put the stadium there, and the amphitheater can come down to downtown St. Pete.
Well, that's a
God bless
possibility.
America.
I think down by the fairgrounds is a possibility for the stadium.
Yeah, I'll just say one other thing with ownership. I think Stu does get a bad rap. He's a very great guy, quiet, but absolutely engaged and has put a lot of money into this effort. And his team, between Matt Silverman and Brian Auld, are everywhere. And so I think it's just, it'd be great if you lived here. But aside from that, he's certainly very engaged, and the team is in first place as we sit here, which is still pretty phenomenal.
He has poured a lot of money into the team, but he does have a very good return on investment. The latest valuations, even though the Rays are like second to last in terms of team valuation, they're just valuated just over $1 billion.
Well, it's all going to come to a head. St. Petersburg Police Department just opened a new station near Tropicana Field. Their old station is going to be torn down, and there's already some great development plans for it. And so, St. Petersburg is already taking off. I was going to say it's ready to take off. It's already taken off. And the development around Tropicana Field is going to be critical to that ongoing success that they're enjoying. And decisions are going to have to be made. So it'll be Really interesting to see what the Rays come up with. Again, they have said they're going to have some kind of announcement in August. We'll see what happens.
What
there.
do you think the Tropicana Field site is worth to the city?
I was just going to say that. I mean, 86 acres of contiguous, which is really important, contiguous land off of a downtown core. I mean, I hate to say it, is almost priceless. I mean, it's unheard of to have that kind of land available. And as Ernest said, I mean, you're almost creating another downtown, and that's where I believe the regional approach is important, because the city of St. Petersburg has a lot of reasons to get either control of that site or at least be able to start planning for the future. And I know the current administration is very much wanting to be involved with that, and so there's a lot of people with different interests in this equation, and I think we just need to find a better way to come together, trust one another, and build those bridges. And say, you know what, Major League Baseball is important in this community, and let's get it done together.
So we need to organize a dishonorable mention summit with Hagan and Mayor Kreisman.
Well, and I also think, I heard that Chris really wants us to move Tropicana Field because he has been working with UCF to bring a satellite campus that will be bigger and better than any satellite campus of any institution in the state of Florida.
Well, I'm looking forward to the bill that consolidates UCF into USF.
So then USF could be aptly named University of West Central Florida instead of University of South Florida, where people from out of state, are trying to find it in Miami or, really in South Florida.
Did you find the $38 million that you misspent over there? Have you?
UCF was punished this past session.
Allegedly.
If you're a fan of Dishonorable Mention, make sure to also check out Ralph the Lawyer podcast here on the 813 Area Podcast Network. Starring a second-generation Tampa attorney, Ralph Guido makes the law easy and accessible for people, as well as anything but boring. With a menagerie of guests and his staff, Ralph and friends talk about everything from employment issues for women to whether or not you should cooperate with the police during a DUI check. It starts about the law, but it's way more fun and interesting than a statute book. Subscribe in iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever else you get your podcasts.
Well, listen, another topic we wanted to talk about was the criminalization of prostitution. And Becca, I think you had some thought on that subject, and we're going to follow your lead on this one.
Certainly. And I'm interested to hear if you guys have any initial thoughts on this. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I just spent the past week working with some real national thought leaders on sexual violence prevention and healthy relationships. And we spent a lot of time talking about sex tourism and all those different factors, because they all kind of intertwine. And it was interesting because I've been doing some reading, and from a human trafficking standpoint, legalizing prostitution can become really problematic. So I'm not advocating for legalizing prostitution, but I do think there's something to be said for decriminalizing prostitution. So we can not the purveyors. I'm not saying that like purveyors of sex work should be not held accountable, but decriminalizing the act so we can address more effectively not only human trafficking, but also starting to eradicate some of these things and enabling people to testify and create pathways. I know in countries, in some of our Nordic countries, that's been their approach, and it's been incredibly successful. And I was just wondering what your all's thoughts would be on decriminalizing sex work.
Well, what's really interesting and somewhat related to that topic is a story we had on the front of the Tampa Bay Times on June 9th from one of our young dynamic writers, Gabrielle Calise, and it talked about the ban that the city of Tampa implemented on lap dances back in the late 90s and how that all came to a head when...
No pun intended.
No pun intended. When Mayor Arroyo took over and decided to make the focus other crimes that were taking place in Tampa, and the police department, the judicial system, all kind of very quietly agreed with her that there were more important things going on. And so, in a sense, that was sort of decriminalized because there's other crimes that are a greater priority. And so, it related to what you talked about, human sex trafficking, it should be a higher priority than prostitution. If we could somehow take an approach that allows the focus to curb that, then I would be for it. But of course, we live in the Bible Belt, and there's going to be considerable pushback whenever you're talking about de-emphasizing something that is not only seen as illegal but immoral. We have a lot of people of Christian faith here, and that's going to be a hard pill for them to swallow. What do you think, Chris, as our resident Bible Belt person?
I think that it's in the legislature a couple years ago, we decriminalized prostitution for under the age of 18 because we viewed those as victims. In a lot of cases, they were human trafficking, victims. I think that I would be adamantly opposed to making prostitution legal because there's a lot of human trafficking victims that, would still be trafficked. I think if you're looking at decriminalizing the possible victimhood or the possible victims, that's a completely different issue than the Johns or the pimps and other things. And so, that is an interesting thing to consider because it's two sets of people, and I think in a lot of cases, the Johns and the pimps, they have a lot more criminal liability than the women that might be, hooked on drugs or might even be forced into what.
No, I agree. I'm not, I'm talking about the actual service providers, many of whom are homeless LGBT kids. We have a huge population of folks, and that's the only quote way they can get any kind of income, and they're taken in. There's that. And also, again, I'm not excusing people who run operations that exploit and victimize people, whether they're 45 or 14. But I do think decriminalization might help us address the issue in a meaningful way and help eradicate some of these things. It's just something I've been thinking about. I haven't done a tremendous amount of research, but it's where I've been kind of rolling around the past few days.
And I don't mean to be heartless, but we are living in great economic times, record unemployment. And so for somebody to use the excuse of, well, the only way I can make a living is to turn a trick in the parking lot, there are other ways that you can earn a living. Go turn hamburgers instead of turning tricks.
I think one's more lucrative than the other.
Well,
but
I don't really actually know what the yield would be because I think there's a lot withheld, but I think that's a very
but
I know you hate it that I overuse this word, but I think that's a very privileged thing to say. I think it would be very interesting if we were able to talk to somebody who was currently in sex work, like you and I, talk to somebody who was currently in sex work and said, let's see if we can help you find a job, and see, without using our influence, but just getting them a resume, which would be difficult to craft, and potentially a limited economic, how successful would they be at procuring a job, and how long would it take?
You have more experience than the rest of us in this field.
As a sex worker?
No, but in this whole sex field, because you're speaking things and,
no, I know.
and
I was
whatnot.
just being silly.
But do you think that it's reasonable that a prostitute would have to share about 50% of her earnings or more with her pimp?
Do I think it's reasonable?
Yeah, no, I'm saying, do you think that's a reasonable, logical amount So to say,
Is that a reasonable conclusion?
yeah, a reasonable conclusion that she would probably be sharing 50% or more.
I think it's probably more than that. I
Right.
mean, listen, I have an agent, and I would never give my agent that kind of
So-
commission.
Like, and what I would think, and I don't know this for any kind of facts, but by
Right.
watching TV and
He's like, I would like to clarify,
yeah, and
I
all
am not
of
a
that,
customer.
You know, from watching Investigation ID or Live PD.
If Carla was here, she
Right.
would know.
Yeah.
I know that for sure.
So
Carla.
I'm thinking that the average trick is less than $100, like maybe even like 20 or $50. And if you turn one trick an hour and you have to give more.
Come on, Chris. You're really leaning into.
I'm proud to say I know nothing about this topic.
Okay.
Yeah, but and you
Or
have
in Chris's case, 5 seconds.
well,
It's a very quick turnaround.
no, but the prostitutes don't have like people just lined up down the street. They have to go back to the corner when they're done.
So your argument is that it's not as lucrative
Yeah,
as we
and
might
so
think.
what I'm thinking is if they make between 20 and $50 an hour, and they have to split half of that with their pimp, so they're really making between maybe $10 or $20 an hour. That's really not as lucrative as what you think it would be.
No, I don't think it's lucrative at all. I
So
think
why
it's
aren't they flipping burgers instead?
because they're probably not going to get hired. They don't have proper attire. They can't buy the things that they need to get there. They're probably, many of these people are indentured to a certain extent. I mean, it's not exactly that, homeless LGBT teens are a target audience to engage in as the face of an organization who have been turned out into the streets. I mean, these are the people, oftentimes folks who end up in sex work are the people that we try to pretend don't exist in our society. And I don't have a great answer, but if that at all came across like I was shaming LGBTQ teens, I most certainly am not. I'm shaming the fact that there's so many that are homeless. But I think it's easy to say, well, they should just go work at X. But you just said we're at a rocking and roaring economic high. That means there's more people applying for jobs. There's also means there's more people who are engaging. And I think if we literally took this on in a very serious way and found somebody who said, I want to leave sex work, I think it'd be very difficult for us to find somebody to not only hire them, but for them to be able to get to work and do the things they need to do. And it's the cycle, like all these things that are social
I
issues.
imagine there's a lot of psychological issues that person has to overcome to then join the quote unquote average, workforce.
Well, I think for a future show, we can bring in people who do work with that population. I know that there are a lot of advocates, a lot of people advocating against human sex trafficking who are actually making a terrific effort to connect with those people and change the trajectory of their lives. And not to suggest that, I got to be careful here. I don't want to suggest that those at our adult entertainment establishments are engaging in prostitution, because I don't know.
No,
but
not
I
at all.
do know that there's a group of women who go around to the adult entertainment establishments preaching the gospel, and they're actually allowed into the establishments by the owners, and they go in and try to talk to the dancers about choosing a different path. And it'd be great to get one of those folks on to discuss what kind of success they may be having in those efforts. So Mike, you're our special guest. With every special guest, we always try to make a determination about what defines your entire life. So you may not be aware of this, but whatever the number one song was on your 14th birthday determines your entire life. So if you can tell me what day you turn 14, I can, in fairly quick time, share with you what the number one song was on that day.
October 25th, 1994. I'm guessing that's going to maybe be let me think about that. Not Dave Matthews. Maybe a Dave Matthews or
Boys to Men.
Boys to Men.
Wow.
Yeah, Boys to Men.
Oh,
tends
I'll make
to
love.
be,
I'll make love to you. Not you, Ernest, but
And it's not for sale. He is not in the sex work
wow,
business.
Mike, that is very good. You are correct. The number one song on October 25th, 1994 was I'll Make Love to You by Boys to Men. It's a pretty good guess because it was number one from August 27th until December 3rd.
Do you think that was Mike's slogan when he ran for president at USF? I will. Do you think he had shirts made, and that's why he really knows that?
You were
It's his-
back-to-back student,
I was.
body president.
I was.
I don't think that was the slogan, no. I think
No.
Do you think it was just the undercurrent energy of the campaign that he was going to love USF like it'd never been loved before?
I think my wife's going to listen to this. I better.
Well, now
Mike-
we know why she's always spreading her sunshine. I think that.
But Mike, our goal is to push you into dangerous territory.
I love it. I love
Get
it.
you
I
to
love
say
it.
Going
things
rate
you'll
of a
regret.
prostitute on Fowler Avenue is.
Mike has no idea.
Well, I've heard from a guy that it's roughly. Well, it's actually pretty popular near the campus.
Yeah,
you
I
know,
would imagine. Not a lot going on over there.
or so I've heard.
Well, the other thing you hear a lot about is the quote unquote sugar daddies and sugar mamas. And there's been some surveys that indicate USF is one of the leaders in terms of co-eds who serve as who serves sugar daddies. We've written that story a couple of times in the Tampa Bay
By the way,
Times.
print media is not dead if they're writing stories like that. So
What website
I will
was that?
Gotta stay relevant, man. Gotta stay relevant.
Interesting. That's fascinating. Do you think it's because there's not as many job opportunities because we need some good economic development around that university?
Well, in all seriousness, I think that there's a real struggle for our college students today. One of the trends that we've seen is the placement of food banks on college campuses, including the University of South Florida, Tampa, as well as Hillsborough Community College, Del Mabry. And we used to make jokes about being a starving college student, but it's not a joke anymore. We have kids who are really struggling to make ends meet, and the famous anecdotes about ramen noodles no longer contain as much comedy as they once did. So
There was actually a student leader on the USF campus this past year, campus-wide leader, who had to use the food bank that was on campus. And so it's not just as, people think, oh, well, it's students that can't afford this or, can't do that. I mean, this is someone who was literally one of the top leaders on campus. And some of us found out about that and helped him out. But it was it's right in front of your face. And Feeding Tampa Bay, if you guys are ever looking for an organization to highlight, Feeding Tampa Bay just does incredible work. And when you look at the number of people in our community that, double income household or single income household, working a very, very good job that cannot afford food is real, and that the working poor in our community is very real. And so it's not individuals that are lazy or can't get a job. These are people that are working yet still can't put food on the table. And Feeding Tampa Bay does an amazing job to bridge that gap. But they're not even
shameless self plug. The next episode of Ernest Hooper's That's All I'm Saying on WEDU will air in August, and it's going to focus on the Alice Report and the work being done by United Way Tampa Bay, as well as Feeding Tampa Bay. So it's a real issue. We have people who are averaging $44,000 a year in income, and they aren't able to make ends meet, or they are one speed bump, one health concern, one missed paycheck away from being in real trouble. And we saw that when the federal government shut down and Tampa International had to rally to help the air traffic control employees as well as the TSA employees get by during that period. They couldn't afford to miss one paycheck, and once they missed one, they were in real trouble. So
Coast Guard was the same way over at St. Pete International.
Sure. So I'll Make Love to You by Boyz II Men defines your entire life. You can let your wife know.
That is an accurate statement, Ernest. Just for the record. And do I get like a gift or something for guessing that? I mean,
You should.
I mean, a mug
Would you
or
like
something.
a UCF shirt?
I've been wanting to.
How about a donut? Becca, do we have a donut for Mike?
I've been wanting to start a controlled burn in my yard, so I guess I could start it with the UCF shirt.
Chris about to give you the shirt off of his back. What a great
Yeah.
representative.
Yeah, because I did wear a UCF shirt.
Yeah, I would ask you to donate, all of the listeners out there, to donate all of your UCF gear to the charity of your choice. But I just don't even want them on the street anywhere. I mean, look at that logo.
Mike Griffin trying to keep Tampa Bay, trying to clean up Tampa Bay by getting rid of the UCF logos.
Are y'all ready for the
what a
Florida
noble
Man
effort.
story?
Yes. How about the
And
Florida Man?
There are two of them. One of them was on Fox News, and one of them was in Time Magazine.
Well, there's one legitimate news source.
Both of
Go
them
ahead.
was on June 9th, so I will let y'all pick. Do you want the Fox News version, or do you want the Time Magazine one?
Well, of course, I want the Time Magazine one, but we can do both and see.
All right, in Time Magazine, Florida man arrested for dialing 911 when he wanted vodka.
When he what?
Wanted vodka.
Wanted vodka?
Yep.
Yeah, Drizzle, right?
Yeah.
Come on, Drizzly.
Just like,
Yeah, yeah.
And the Fox News one is pretty much kind of like a Fox News story. It is from Southwest Florida. Florida man arrested for mid-flight battery against flight attendant, calling her racial slur and, quote, too big for this job.
Oh, wow.
And
well, at least they're on brand.
yeah, his name is Gregory Alexander, and he looks like a somebody that would be arrested for that. And he is from North Fort Myers.
Oh, well,
You got to assume that flight attendant wasn't my friend, Deneen.
no.
He's probably a UCF grad, but
Yeah, and speaking of Deneen, I joined the dadgum Facebook group of her high school this week to try to find her, the alumni group, and I still could not
Did you
find
put
her.
in a request?
Yes.
Like, hey,
And
does
they
anyone
accepted
know
it.
what's going on with?
Well, because I don't know how to spell her name, and I don't know her last name. I have a vague description and a first name. That's about it.
You and I will
So
get
what I'm
into
thinking,
cahoots with this.
What I'm thinking is we can get Ernest hypnotized, and then the hypnotist could try to draw out her last name from Ernest.
This will come as no surprise that I know somebody who is a licensed hypnotherapist.
Right. So how about we do that on an episode?
What I'm happy about is that Mike has no idea who Deneen is. And you know what, Mike? We're going to keep it that way.
I'm a longtime listener of this amazing podcast, and I feel like I know her quite well, including the visuals of you in that hot tub. are just in my mind in a very inappropriate way. So
With Boyz II Men playing in the background.
Listen, and he was just trying to spread the sunshine. That's
right.
why.
Thank you.
Or who was the 80s boy band that was like Boyz II Men? New Edition? Was that in the 80s?
Well, there were several
Yeah,
boy
New
bands.
Edition was in the 80s.
So New Edition was playing in the background with Ernest and Deneen in the hot tub.
See, now
club.
y'all getting all my
Game.
stories mixed up together. Deneen was not involved in the hot tub. That's a different story.
Man, we really didn't think you were lining it up like that, is I guess what we're trying to say. I mean, come on now.
I think we should give Mike a opportunity to tell us a little bit about his wife's nonprofit and the efforts that she's making since you're kind enough to join us. How about a minute or two to talk about that?
Thanks, Ernest. So my wife, Melanie, is transitioning out of a very successful law career, amazing lawyer, and following her passion and her dreams with her business called Spread Your Sunshine. And it's a few different things ranging from a custom stationery line to public speaking, even some coaching, but it's really focused on empowering women in life and in the workplace. And Becca has been a huge inspiration to Melanie with all of Becca's success in her business. And I'm happy to say that in a very short period of time, she's covering her costs, and she's got a full-time employee and an intern. Her office is at Armature, very cool place. And
let's be honest, she's the coolest member of your household,
without question. But just I think it's a great example of
Mike's not even number 2 in his house, man. Maverick's ahead of
Maverick here, and we have
Molly
a dog.
is pretty magnificent as well. They're Labrador.
Yes, I know my role in my household, but it's just incredible. And I would say that for anyone that is looking to make a change, it's never too late or never too early, and just do it. And I think her only regret is not having done this earlier. And it's just really incredible what she's doing and the impact she's making in a lot of people's lives.
Wow, that is awesome. And Becca, I wanted to point out that Maverick is wearing a Vineyard Vines shirt.
Yes.
I don't know if you picked up on that or not.
Of course I did. I was very pleased to see that, and he looks
a bit envious.
Not envious. I'm just proud to see him.
How do you know that's a Vineyard Vine shirt?
It's got the little well on it. That's the Vineyard Vines logo, Chris.
But no, I think it's wonderful. I mean, listen, I've had the privilege of knowing Mike forever, and he is a remarkably accomplished person. He has done great things since he was a very young person. I mean, and even some of the early days in his career when he and Jessica Muroff started Emerge Tampa, which truly and absolutely changed my life for the better, and thousands of other people. To say that he is second fiddle to his bride is really no small potatoes. I mean, that's a household of people who are truly committed to changing our world and our community for the better. And so that's how Mike stays so humble, is he's just surrounded by great people. And if you meet his parents, then you're like, aha, because his parents are fantastic as well.
We just need Mike to run for office.
Ooh, yeah, let's talk about that. Because you have been rumored for a number of offices over the years, and you've yet to take the plunge. Is that going to change?
So two things. One, I have a pretty simple philosophy on that. Family, career, and politics. You can do 2 of the 3 really well. And family is always going to be one. I'm fortunate to have a very successful business and career there. And I would love to one day be in a position where I'm financially independent from the office that I seek. And but I also realized very early on, and Becca mentioned it with Emerge and starting that with Jessica Muroff, is you can make one hell of a difference in this community without being in elected office. And that's what I've tried doing. And in the last few years, we moved a Confederate monument, and the ability to raise $70,000 in 90 minutes from the private sector was one of the best moments of my life. And I, it's situations where you can't control what's happening nationally or even, regionally, but, in my city, in my community, it's issues like that I can have an influence on, and we did that, but we did it by building bridges, working with all parties, and I think you've seen that in a lot of the big issues that we've taken on, like transportation, like higher ed, but it's also great to have guys like Chris Ladvala there who are there for the right reasons, and it works with all of his constituents, and we need more like him.
Well, and one of the things that I think is really, really fantastic is, number one, yes, Mike is a tremendous community leader, and that is terrific. But one of the things that, and this is not a story I tell publicly often, but when they went through their first leadership transition and Mike and Jess had finished their first 2 years, I was tapped to be the co-chair of the political wing of Emerge. And was paired up with a Republican counterpart. And I just was like, I don't know about this guy. Like, I just thought, I remember I was like, I just don't know if I can, like, I thought he was just a little extra and I just couldn't handle it. And so I called Mike and I was like, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can handle this guy. And he's like, you need to trust me. He's a great person. And Mike was right. He became one of my closest friends. He sits on the board of one student and I adore him. And that's just the example. That was
We make assumptions about Republicans often.
I think all Democrats do.
I think we
Rightfully
probably,
so.
I think we probably do, but I think it's also speaks to how willing I am to take the advice of smart people and not just dig my heels in, because I'm better for it, and Emerge was better for it, and one student is better for it.
Well, we'll close with this. Do you know who wrote one of the first stories about Mike Griffin and Jessica Murrow?
I'm going to go ahead and say that it's going to be Ernest Hooper.
This guy. I don't even know if Mike remembers, man. I met
we
had lunch with him.
at Maggiano's.
Yes.
I remember that. I was
many years
I was a
ago.
young pup. I was a young pup.
I was too.
Gosh, that was what? That was
You were
16 years
great.
ago.
That was 16 years ago. And Ernest, Bob Tregot, who I miss at the times, but really, really did a fantastic job of telling our story about young professionals. And you look at the dream back then to where we are now, and we talked about all the development happening in our community. It's because that talent is staying and that talent's coming back. And Richard Florida was right when he wrote the creative class, and we've kind of followed that playbook, and it's amazing where we're at.
Well, and think of how many great friendships we have and that we still have regardless, and I think it truly goes to show that if you want to make a difference in your community, start by showing up and finding a way to that excites you, but get engaged, because these relationships that you make, if you are smart and if you take advantage of that opportunity, will be with you for the rest of your life.
And I'll just say one other thing, just to that end. It doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what you look like, what God you preach or doesn't, who you love, what neighborhood you're in. If you care, if you follow through, you build consensus, you can do anything you want in this community. I'm not a Tampa native, and I don't say this to brag, but the fact that I was the youngest, reportedly the youngest chairman in the history of the Tampa Chamber in 130 years, that does not happen by someone that was candidly born in another county and moved here, and the product of two amazing parents that don't come from wealth. And so it literally, if you do those things, you can do anything here, and that's why I love calling this place home, and I will for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I think, Mike, to back that up, and we'll wrap up. I think what we have seen in Tampa in the last 10 or 15 years is an opening up of what we used to call the good old boy network, and we're no longer assigning priority to those who grew up in Tampa and those who are third and fourth generation, and we're making this city and this region more welcoming to newcomers, and that's been key to some of the success and progress that we've seen. All right, that's me getting off the soapbox. Let's close up with a couple of shout outs. Becca, you have a shout out you want to give?
I do. I am happy to report that I just spent a wonderful week in Ohio rolling out curriculum to half of their institutions of higher education. And I just want to applaud the great state of Ohio for their visionary leadership on how they're addressing the issue of sexual assault, consent, and healthy relationships, because they're doing something that no one else is doing in the entire nation. And I think, bravo, Ohio, way to be a winning swing state.
I want to give a shout out to the Right Field program at the Poynter Institute of Media Studies. I'm one of the co-leaders of that program. We had our year-end celebration this week. We have a tremendous group of middle school and high school kids in that program who show up one Saturday every month to learn more about writing, to learn more about how writing can help unlock those mental collisions that happen inside your brain. And The kids are terrific. And I just want to give a shout out to the kids and my co-leader, DeMorris Lee, for helping us have a great year. Chris, do you have a shout out?
Yeah, this past week was the 30th anniversary of the tragic murder of Joe Rogers and her daughters from Ohio, who were tourists and were raped and killed and thrown overboard in Tampa Bay. And the Tampa Bay Times did a series of articles that I read this past week. Originally, they were published years ago after the trial of Ober Chandler. But that series is called Angels and Demons, and I believe it won several Pulitzer Prizes, and was very nicely written by Thomas French and a couple other reporters from the Times, and just a tragic story from part of Tampa Bay's history.
Yeah, arguably the finest story we've ever published in the Tampa Bay Times, certainly during my 20 plus years at the paper. Mike, you have a shout out you want to give?
Just a quick one. Little random, I guess, but the American Victory ship, which is parked in downtown Tampa. I was there with various members of various veterans to celebrate and toast the 75th anniversary of D-Day. But it's just a reminder of that amazing ship and what it represents. And I hope that with all the amazing activity happening on Water Street, that ship is restored and put in a place where it can really shine in our community, because it really helps bring our veterans together. And it was just really cool to be on the deck on last Thursday. But it's just an amazing asset that a lot of people don't know about, and hope more people would check it out.
All right. Well, Mike, thanks for that. And certainly the remembrance of D-Day was an important one for this nation. All right. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Mike Griffin, thank you for joining us on this very special podcast.
Thank you.
Chris, Becca, I love you guys. And we will talk to you next time. And Dr. Mastracchio will be back from being on assignment, and we'll get a full report on what she has to say. And that's all I'm saying.